I never made it, but I know what it takes. I'm motivated by a mix of emotion. Got my statement, and I'm reading it slow so I can understand it fully. Appreciate my standing, go out of this world and right on time. Oh, never in my life have I seen the sky light up like this. I'm far away from Earth and I wanna know if you exist. Mission control, do you read me? Send me my coordinates lately. Mission control, am I drifting? Tie me to someone who will love me, yeah. Wait, I think I'll last a bit longer. Fine.
Welcome everyone. Welcome everyone. Welcome everyone to another Ref Brandon and the Todd family YouTube video. Wherever you are, whatever you may be doing, thank you so much for making Ref Brandon and the Todd family a part of your day. We always greatly appreciate it. Today, I'm going to talk about something we have not really talked about a lot in the last week or so, and that is college football. Now, I know I've had some videos where I've brought up a topic or mentioned something about college football, but I don't think I've done a video that's strictly college football in a week and a half or 2 weeks now. So today we're going to talk some college football, and this comes from DraftKings, which of course, if you're in the betting world, you know that DraftKings is pretty much the leader outside of all the Vegas insiders as far as in the betting world, in the world of sports. It used to be DraftKings and FanDuel, and I think FanDuel's pretty much almost irrelevant now. So DraftKings has taken over the top of the heap for all the bettors out there in the world of not just college football, but betting in general. This is DraftKings over-unders for 2023 college football teams. And I'm not going to sit here and give you every single team in all of the Power 5 conferences, because for one, that would take all day long. If you would like to know about every single team in the world of college football, whether it's Power 5 or Group of 5, you can easily get on Google and type up DraftKings over-under college football and find every single team. But I wrote down 4 or 5 teams in the Power 5 conferences, which of course is the ACC, the Big 12, the Pac-12, the Big 10, and the SEC. And I'm going to talk about either the teams that are typically good in all the conferences, or the teams that have some kind of name value behind them. And those will be what we'll talk about. I'm not going to come on here and tell you that Vanderbilt is picked to win 3 or 4 games this year, because that's what Vanderbilt does every year. Vanderbilt sucks. They've sucked. They're always going to suck. So it's nothing new to come on here and tell you that Vandy is going to win 3 or 4 games. That's per usual. The only thing that would make Vanderbilt worth talking about is if all of a sudden the over-under comes out and Vandy's picked to win 8 games. Then it would be a story. But Vandy picked to win 3 or 4 games is nothing new. That's the norm. So we'll talk about the teams that matter in each conference. As always, any thoughts on it, please feel free to let me know. And I separated it by conference because typically, normally, usually, when you're looking at college football stuff and you get on a website, they break it down by conference. So I wrote it down that way because it's easier that way. But in the ACC, we have Clemson picked to win 9.5 games. Florida State, 10, North Carolina 8.5, and Miami 7.5. The only reason Miami's on the list is because Miami's one of those teams that even if they go 1-11 one year, the very next year people are going to say, look out for the Hurricanes. But of course, this is year 2 under Mario Cristobal, and 7.5 is about where they should be, and it's about where they are every year. And if that's what they do this year, that's not really much improvement from last year. And I think they've got Clemson at 9.5 because they've got a brand new offensive coordinator and a brand new quarterback. So we don't know how fast and how quick that quarterback and offensive coordinator are going to gel. But looking over their schedule, I know I've said on here many a times the last couple of years that I think Florida State is trending in the right direction. And it looks like DraftKings agrees with me because they've got Florida State at 10, which would make them the best team in the ACC. Even if Florida State does beat Clemson, I don't really see a lot of other losses on the schedule for Clemson. Even though they played Duke this year and Duke has improved, Duke is still not as good as Clemson is. But unless they just have a game like they had last year against the Irish, where the offense just flat out didn't show up, I think if Clemson can score 24 points a game, they're going to win the majority of their games because their defense this year is going to be elite. And I think NC State has gotten worse. I think Wake Forest has gotten worse. I think Syracuse is about the same. I think Boston College is about the same. So even though they've got Clemson at 9.5, I think I'll take the over on that. In the Pac-12, we don't have a team that's picked to win double digits, but we have 5 teams that if DraftKings is right, they're all going to be within 1 game of each other. The best team in the Pac-12 this year, according to DraftKings, will be the Oregon Ducks. They're picked to win 9.5 games along with USC. And then we have the Huskies of Washington at 9. And then we have UCLA and Utah both at 8.5. So 2 teams, 9.5 wins. 2 teams, 8.5 wins. And the Huskies at 9. And it's funny because they've got Florida State 10, and they've got Washington with 9. And typically, normally, when you look at teams over-unders, it's hardly ever a flat number like a 10 or a 9. Most of the time, an over-under is always 6.5 or 10.5 or 9.5. That way, you have to pick over or under. When a team is right at 10 or right at 9, you can say, well, that's exactly what they're going to do. And Vegas doesn't make money that way. They make their money by making you pick over or under. But I guess if all the teams in the Pac-12, for the most part, play each other, and you've got 2 at 8.5 and 2 at 9.5, they just put the Huskies right in the middle. In the Big 12, we have Oklahoma at 9.5, Kansas State at 8.5, Texas at 9.5, and Baylor at 7.5. Now, earlier this week, I think it was Monday, word came down that I believe it's Urban Meyer that said he thinks Texas has the best roster this year in college football. And I'm not saying he's wrong, but Texas has a deep roster every year, and it does them no good. And that's why I always gave the Georgia Bulldogs a hard time. Of course, I can't do that now because they've won back-to-back national titles. For the longest time, I would always give Georgia a hard time because top to bottom, Georgia either had the best roster or a top 5 best roster in college football every single year. But then when time for the season to come around, they would find a way to lose. So I'd always give them a hard time because every year Georgia fans would say, it's our year, it's our year. And it never was, even though they had the talent. But now I've got to stop saying that because they've finally done something with the talent. So for now, Texas replaces Georgia as the wait till next year team because Texas has a top 5 roster every year. And that's why they're recycling coaches now because they want to blame the coach because they have all this talent, but they're not winning. But it doesn't matter how much talent you have. If they don't gel together as a team, it does you no good. So I'm not saying that Urban Meyer is right or wrong. All I'm saying is I don't care if they've got 5-star talent at all 22 starting positions and every guy on the bench. If they go out and they go 7-5, then that 5-star talent doesn't mean a hill of beans. And then in the SEC, we have Georgia at 11.5, Alabama at 10.5, LSU and Tennessee at 9.5, and then we have South Carolina at 6.5. And the only reason I wrote that down is because the way last season ended for South Carolina and the way they think they're improving, 6.5 wins would be a disappointment for every Gamecock fan you talk to. If they come out this year and they go anything less than 8-4, I believe their fans are going to feel like they're going backwards because, especially the end of last year, they looked like they were finally going in the right direction. But if I was making my prediction for South Carolina, I would say 7-5. So to me, DraftKings has them about right where they should be. South Carolina is an average football team. So most years they're going to go no worse than 6-6 and no better than 8-4. That's what they do. So to me, 6.5 is about right. But the way they looked at the end of last season, and with Spencer Rattler coming back, they're going to expect more than 6.5 wins. And for Alabama, I'll say it's a lock to pick the under. I know 10.5 is good, but we're talking about a team that lost 2 regular season games last year, and honestly, really, truly, the only reason they lost 2 is because of Bryce Young. If they'd have had any other quarterback in America besides Bryce Young, they'd have probably lost about 4 because they were so close to losing a couple more, and Bryce Young pulled them out. Well, now, of course, Bryce Young is gone, and they still haven't said who their starting quarterback is going to be. But the rumor is it's going to be the Notre Dame transfer. Now, remember, he's transferring to Bama because he got benched at Notre Dame. So for him to get benched at Notre Dame, if he becomes a starter at Alabama, that tells you the tide is hurting at the quarterback position. In this day and time, the game of football is dominated by the quarterback. Now, 15 years ago, when Saban hit his prime at Alabama, and they had quarterbacks like Greg McElroy and Jacob Coker, you could have a game manager and you could win a national title. Now you can't do that. So if they do go with the Notre Dame transfer and he's their quarterback, I don't see any way Alabama doesn't lose at least 3 games, but definitely 2. So I'll say take the under on Alabama's 10.5. And then in the Big Ten, we have Michigan and Ohio State, both at 10.5. Penn State and Wisconsin at 9.5. And then I wrote down Iowa. They're only picked to win 7.5 games, which is about what Iowa does every year. But if you look at their recent history, the last couple of times Iowa's had a 7 or 8 win team, they came back the next year and won 10 or 11 games. And last year they went 7-5 in the regular season. And now, of course, they have the Michigan quarterback that is transferred to Iowa. So I just want to see if they keep up with their recent trend of having a 6 or 7 win season and then coming back the next year and winning 9 or 10. If that's the case, then they'll go way over the 7.5, but we will wait and see. But in Kirk Ferentz's career, if you look at his track record, he wins about 7.5 games every year. So 7.5 is about where they are every year. You can always bank on Iowa every year. Beating one team they have no business beating, and losing to one team they have no business losing to. Any thoughts on any of these over-unders? Please feel free to let me know. Homes for Our Troops is a publicly funded 501c nonprofit organization that builds and donates specially adapted custom homes nationwide for severely injured post 9/11 veterans. Since the 2004 inception, nearly 90 cents of every dollar spent has gone directly to our program services for veterans. Visit at hfotusa.org. Let's go ahead and get our dad joke of the day in here. What kind of car does an egg drive? A yolks wagon. And that does it for today's Ref Brandon and the Todd Family YouTube video. Until next time, it's Ref Brandon saying, just like in pro wrestling, life can be over by the count of 3. Tell your friends and family how much you love them. Bye.